right, so they want to know which equations have the same roots that the picture has. So right now, I just want you to realize this is the factored form of this parabola. So if you think about, our x minus p and x minus q, that intercept form, that's basically what this is in. So x plus 1 would be the same thing as x minus negative 1. And x minus q is the same thing as x minus 4. So the value of p is negative 1, and the value of q is positive 4. So basically it's going to be the opposite of the sign that you see. That is where your intercepts are. The other way you could get it is you could set each parenthesis equal to 0, right? And x minus 4 equals 0, and then you can solve for x from there, but you still get negative 1 and 4. So just keep in mind, x is the value that makes the problem 0, so the p and the q will always be opposite of the sign that you see in here. Okay, so you can see 1, 2, 3, 4. That is, one of your x-intercepts, and 1, negative 1 is the value of the other x-intercept. So there's a couple different ways we can do this. So I know that the x-intercepts are negative 1 and 4. So by definition, if I plug negative 1 in for x, I should get 0. And if I plug 4 in for x, I should get 0. That's what x-intercept does. So you have a couple choices. You can put negative 1 and 4 into each of these functions. You can certainly do that. Or I honestly feel like it would be quicker if you just factored them real quick and see if the factored forms get you the same outcomes. So really quick, what I'd like to do is divide everything by negative 2, because that's a division property of equality that really serves me well right here. And I get x squared plus 5x plus 4 equals 0. And then I can just cheat and write the answer because I know a is 1. So factors of 4 that make 5 would get me positive 1 and positive 4. So if you compare this to this, this says x minus 4, that says x plus 4, so a is a no-go. They got to match up. All right. If I were to solve b, I'd have to move the 4 over, right? And I would factor that into x minus 4, x plus 1. Right? Those numbers will do the trick. And that is the same thing that I have here. Order does not matter. So b is going to have the same roots. This one's already factored, so we just compare, and obviously it's wrong because the signs are backwards, so that's not going to get me the same roots. All right, letter D is very interesting. So again, we can plug negative 1 and 4 in for x. I'm going to tell you it's not going to work out. There's something interesting going on here with letter D. If you think about the graph, you would go right 1 and then up 4. So that would put you somewhere like here. And it's a smiley face. So it's actually not going to have any intercepts at all. So there are no x-intercepts, so D is definitely out. And then letter E, obviously I want this side to be 0, so I'm going to subtract those over real quick. And if I was you, I would notice something about 6, 18, and 24. So if you can pick up on patterns, that makes you really successful. So we can divide everything in this equation by 6. So we get x squared, negative 3x, negative 4. And if you look, that is the same thing as letter B. So of course E is going to work because it's basically letter B again. All right, so then we have a word problem. All right, these are very, very normal word problems. They're based on the acceleration due to gravity. So they love to use these kinds of word problems for you. Something about height and falling and X amount of seconds or T seconds. They love to do this, so not a big deal. So this is the formula for height based on the speed of gravity. So it's the height of a free-falling object that's just dropped. So it's different than if I were to throw an object in the air where there's an initial velocity, because that's going to have an impact. But this is just like if you held a penny and you dropped it. This is the speed at which it travels to hit the ground. It's just basic physics stuff. So negative 16 t squared plus, and this is pronounced h sub 0. All right. The t stands for seconds and h stands for the height in feet. So obviously if I ask you for seconds, that's like asking you for x, and if I ask you for height, that's like asking you for y. So before you can even start this problem, you probably want to know what h sub 0 actually means. It means the height, hence the h, at time 0. So 0 seconds would mean your starting height. So not surprising, h sub 0 is really the y-intercept. That's just how we write it in physics world, in higher level math world. So if you ever see a letter with a subscript of 0, that basically means the starting amount, because 0 seconds have gone by since that object fell. All right, so we have a skydiver who drops out of an airplane, and currently the height is 4624 feet. So they want you to write a formula. So all you have to do is realize, okay, my starting height is 4624, so that should go where the y-intercept is. So my formula is negative 16t squared plus 4624, and we don't want to make it any more complicated than that. All right, and just like, x's and y's, I should have two variables in my formula. So my t's would be my x's, my h would be my y's. All right, so let's answer some follow-up questions. So let's say his shoe fell off. So I didn't want to say how long until he hits the ground. He's going to deploy a parachute at some point, or he's going to die. So let's just say his shoe fell off. His shoe is not going to be slowed down by a parachute. So how many seconds would it take for his shoe to hit the ground? All right, so we have to realize that when they say like hit the ground, or the word ground, or land, they mean the height is 0 feet. So anytime they mention about hitting ground or landing, you're supposed to take that as, oh, let's plug 0 in for height, because if it's on the ground, it's 0 feet above the ground, so y is 0. What I don't know is t, so I have to put 0 in for h and solve for t. So the way I would do this is I would solve by factoring. I would try to factor out a negative 16. You can do a positive 16, but it's like I said, I like my my x squared term to be positive. So 16 does go into 4624 289 times. And you always want to check when you have two items here, it's subtraction, it's a difference, and this is a square. You might want to check if that's a square, because there's a good chance it is. And 289 is the square of 17. So the negative 16 is just kind of there for the ride, but we're going to factor this difference of squares into t plus 17 and t minus 17. And then we're going to use that zero product property to go ahead and solve for t. So we would take each item, right, each parentheses, and normally that would include the 16, right, because I could easily do this, and that's the same thing as what I had. So there's 3 separate groups that I would need to set equal to 0. Now, I'm not going to write negative 16 equals 0, right? I don't want to do that. That's a waste of my time. That's not going to have a solution. So I kind of disregard that. But keep in mind, if this said like t, you would have to write t equals 0 as one of your equations. But because it's not, we won't do that. But we do have to write that t plus 17 equals 0 and t minus 17 equals 0. And that's going to get me 2 answers, positive 17 and negative 17. Now here's where you've got to be careful, okay? The question was, how many seconds would it take for a shoe to hit the ground? So you can't have negative 17 seconds, so you have to be realistic and realize it's 17. At approximately 17 seconds, that shoe will land on the ground. Letter C is another follow-up. It says, okay, well, what would the height of the skydiver be after 5 seconds? And again, we're going to assume he has not deployed his parachute yet, so he's still traveling at that same rate of speed. Okay, well, it looks like I gave you time, right? So wouldn't it make sense to put 5 in for t? And of course, we want to always use our starting formula. So we're going to do negative 16 times 5 squared plus 4624. And we're just going to compute that out. Now I put this step here because I see kids mess up a lot. You do not want to do 16 times 5 and then square it. You just went out of PEMDAS order. You must square first and then multiply. So you're going to end up getting 42 24 feet. So after 5 seconds, that's approximately what his height will be. Alright, so in my next lesson video, I'm going to show you the square root method to solve quadratics and then do a couple of those problems and a mixture of factoring problems.